Picture this. You've been sat on the bank for hours. You've put your heart and soul into prepping the perfect ground bait and clipped up on the most promising spot in the swim. Then finally, the tip flies round. You strike, and it's another tiny roach, no bigger than your finger. Frustrating, isn't it? But what if I told you that your perfectly mixed, aromatic bait isn't actually attracting big fish? In fact, it's practically screaming at them to stay as far away as possible. It sounds mad, but for many anglers, it's the cold, hard truth. In this video, we're breaking down 20 fatal mistakes that turn your feeder into a free buffet for tiddlers and a massive warning sign for trophy bream or carp. Most importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix them. Stick around until the end, and I promise your fishing will change forever. Before we dive into the mistakes, let's take a look under the surface and get into the psychology of the fish. Small stuff like tiny roach, skimmers, or bleak are always hungry. They're everywhere, and they're incredibly bold. They live by the rule of grab it and run. Any cloud in the water or sharp scent is an immediate dinner bell for them, and they don't care about competition because there are thousands of them. Now look at the big trophy fish. These are cautious, experienced veterans. They've spent years avoiding nets, pike, and clever anglers. A big fish isn't going to rush in for the first snack it sees. It values safety and quiet above all else. To a big fish, a frantic swarm of small fry and an unnatural explosion of color or scent isn't an invite, it's an alarm bell. Our job isn't to create a noisy, chaotic buffet for everyone. It's to set up a quiet, exclusive restaurant for our VIP guests. Understanding that one simple difference is the real key to success. Right. First and most common mistake is making your ground bait far too fine. A lot of anglers, especially those just starting out, think that a super smooth powdery mix is the way to go. They'll spend ages grinding everything down to a fine dust, thinking it'll create an irresistible attraction cloud. And they're right, it does. The only problem is that cloud is a total magnet for small nuisance fish. These tiny particles stay suspended in the water column, creating a pillar of silt that can be seen from a mile off. Small fish swarm the area, frantically filtering through the cloud and often stopping your hook bait from even reaching the bottom. So what does a big bream or carp see when they approach the swim? They see a chaotic frenzy of tiny fish and assume it's either unsafe or simply not worth their time. Big fish want something substantial on the deck, not just a cloud of dust. So, remember, your ground bait needs to contain larger, visible particles that stay put on the bottom rather than hanging in the water. Think of the difference between a hearty stew packed with chunks of meat and a simple glass of tomato juice. Which one would you choose for your dinner? The second mistake follows on from the first, and that's going overboard with clouding agents. I'm talking about things like powdered milk, cocoa, egg powder, or those fancy geysers and cloud additives you find in tackle shops. Now these definitely look impressive. The moment your feeder hits the bottom, a thick cloud billows out, and you'd think it would draw in every fish for miles. No, we already know exactly what kind of fish it actually attracts. These components are fine for match fishing when you need to quickly pull in small, active fish like bleak. But for specimen hunting, they're a disaster. It's like playing loud pop music and putting on a strobe light in a five-star restaurant. You'll attract a crowd of rowdy teenagers, but the serious guests will just turn around and walk out. Large fish want their food sitting quietly on the deck. A subtle, natural haze as your ground bait breaks down is perfectly fine. It's actually helpful. But a massive, lingering pillar of dust is an alarm bell. Use these additives sparingly or avoid them altogether if you're really looking to land a proper trophy. Let's talk about scents. Mistake number 3 is using ground bait that's just too sweet. Those candy aromas like vanilla, caramel, strawberry, or tutti frutti. Walk into any tackle shop and the shelves are groaning with these sugary syrups and sprays. And look, they do work. No, the question is, what are they actually catching? Mostly just the small, non-selective stuff. For a little roach or a silver bream, a sweet scent signals easy, high-energy food. But a wise old bream or a big carp, they're suspicious. As fish get older, their tastes change. They start looking for more complex, natural, or even savory profiles, fishy, meaty, or spicy notes, things like coriander, pepper, or garlic. That's what grabs the attention of a real specimen. Think of it like this. Kids love sweets and candy floss, but an adult would much rather have a grilled steak or a fresh coffee. Stop feeding the fish candy. Try adding something a bit more serious and natural to your mix, and you'll be amazed at the result. Continuing with the topic of scents, let's look at the 4th mistake, using harsh, synthetic flavorings. This is especially true when it comes to cheap, highly concentrated glugs and sprays. Manufacturers often use aggressive chemical compounds to achieve a pungent, long-lasting aroma that appeals to us. But remember, a fish's sense of smell is hundreds, if not thousands of times more sensitive than our own. What smells pleasant to us can feel like a total chemical assault to them. Imagine walking into a small room where someone has just emptied an entire bottle of cheap perfume. Your first instinct is to turn around and get some fresh air as fast as you can. That is exactly how a large, cautious fish reacts. An unnaturally strong scent doesn't stimulate their appetite, it triggers suspicion. They know that nothing in nature smells quite that intense, so to them it immediately signals a trap. It's far more effective to use natural attractants, things like grain oils, liquid worm or maggot extracts, or high-quality additives from reputable brands used in very modest quantities. Always remember the golden rule, less is more. It's much better to underdose than to overdo it. Mistake number 5 is having a uniform, boring texture. Even if you've filtered out the fine dust, if your ground bait consists of particles that are all roughly the same size, like just breadcrumbs and crushed corn, you're missing a trick. This kind of mix fills up the small fish quickly and then they move on. But more importantly, it won't hold a proper specimen for long. To a big fish, a uniform mush is just uninspiring. There's nothing to sift through, nothing to really get stuck into. They'll quickly realize there's no real meal there and head off in search of a better spread. Your ground bait should be more like a chunky muesli than a smooth porridge. It needs a variety of sizes, different densities, and different nutritional values. You want some bits that dissolve fast, some that break down slowly, and some that just sit on the bottom waiting to be found. This forces the fish to root around, picking out the choice morsels, which keeps them in your swim longer and makes them drop their guard. And that is exactly what we're after. This brings us to the 6th, and arguably most critical mistake, a lack of large, nutritious particles in your ground bait. These act as the anchors that stop big fish in their tracks and keep them feeding. Think of breadcrumbs and ground cereals as just the carrier, the foundation used to deliver the main course to the lakebed. That main course needs to be something the small fry can't just vacuum up in seconds. We're talking about things like sweet corn, boiled peas, pearl barley, various sizes of pellets, chopped boilies, or even live bait. This is exactly what those specimen fish are looking for. When a big fish sees a spread of safe, high-energy food, it settles down to feed. The smaller fish might hang around picking at the crumbs, but the real meal stays there for the boss of the swim. If your mix lacks these larger items, A big fish might be drawn in by the scent, but it won't find anything worth staying for and will simply move on. So don't be shy with your additives. If it looks tasty enough for you to eat, the fish will likely feel the same way. Mistake number 7 is all about how you prepare your particles. We're talking about grains like maize, peas, wheat, and pearl barley. A common slip-up is rushing the process, either just scalding them with boiling water or not boiling them nearly long enough. This leaves you with grains that are rock hard and practically inedible. Think about what happens next. You bait up your swim, the grains sit on the bottom, smelling great. But when the fish move in, they can't actually eat them. Even worse, if a fish does manage to swallow these hard particles, it can cause real digestive trouble. Instead of drawing them in, you're actually creating a negative association with your spot. The fish learn that the food there is bad news. Properly prepared particles should be soft enough to easily squash between your thumb and finger. They need to be fully cooked through. This not only makes them more attractive to the fish, but also allows them to soak up your liquids and additives much more effectively. Take that extra hour to boil them properly or let them steep in a flask. Trust me, the fish will appreciate the effort and you'll be rewarded with much more confident takes. The 8th mistake, and one even the most seasoned anglers make, is overlooking live components. In the rush to use the latest boilies, pellets and liquids, we often forget what fish find most attractive: natural food. I'm talking about bloodworm, maggots and chopped worms. Mixing these into your ground bait can honestly work wonders. First, it sends out a massive food signal. The scent and taste of real protein is something no artificial additive can truly replicate. Second, there's the movement. Larvae wriggling on the lakebed create micro vibrations and a visual trigger that big fish simply can't ignore. It taps right into their natural instincts. While the smaller fish will certainly have a go, they fill up fast. A big bream or carp, however, will sit on your spot for hours, picking out every last bit. It might make your session a bit more expensive, but sometimes just a handful of chopped worm in the feeder is what stands between you and the trophy of a lifetime. Don't skimp on the very things fish are programmed to eat every single day. Mistake number 9, using ground bait that's just too active. We've already mentioned clouding agents, but there are plenty of other ways to make a mix work through the water column. Think of fizzing additives, pop-up components, or even hemp seeds that float up as the feeder breaks down, dragging other particles with them. This kind of activity is brilliant when you're targeting fish mid-water like roach or bleak. But for big, wary fish feeding on the deck, it can be a real deal-breaker. Put yourself in the position of a large bream. You're trying to feed peacefully on the bottom and suddenly there's a firework display of particles going off right over your head. It creates far too much commotion, attracts small nuisance fish, and makes the bigger ones suspicious. Large specimen fish prefer a quiet environment. They want a buffet that's neatly laid out on the lakebed. If you're after a trophy, your ground bait needs to be inert. This means that once it hits the bottom, it stays there, slowly breaking down and releasing its scent, rather than exploding and scattering bits all over the swim. Mistake number 10, and it's one that many people completely overlook: choosing the wrong color for your ground bait. We often get caught up in the smell or the ingredients, but color is just as vital, especially in clear water or when you're targeting wary fish. Think about it. The bottom of most lakes and rivers is dark, usually a mix of grey, brown, or dull green. If you drop a bright yellow or red patch of bait right in the middle of that, it looks incredibly suspicious. To a fish, especially the bigger, smarter ones, it's like a neon sign screaming, "Something's wrong here." Pro anglers always aim to match their ground bait to the color of the lakebed. They'll use specialized dyes or natural additives like soil or clay to get the shade just right. A dark mix on a dark bottom doesn't spook the fish. It makes them feel safe, allowing them to settle and feed confidently. Now you can still use bright colors for your hook bait to help it stand out, but the main baited area should be well camouflaged. Sometimes something as simple as darkening your mix can be the key to turning a quiet session into a brilliant one. Mistake number 11 is all about consistency, specifically overwetting your mix. It might seem harmless to add a touch too much water, but it can actually ruin your entire session. When ground bait is too wet, it turns into a sticky, doughy mess. It might feel fine when you're molding a ball or filling a feeder, but once it hits the bottom, it's useless. It just sits there like a brick, releasing no particles and no scent. The fish might be swimming right over it, but they aren't getting any signal to feed. At best, it'll finally break down hours later when you're already packing up to go home. At worst, it'll just sit there going sour and actually spooking the fish away. Properly dampened ground bait should be light and fluffy. It should hold its shape when you squeeze it, but crumble away with the lightest touch of a finger. This consistency ensures the bait stays in the feeder until it reaches the deck, where it can immediately start working to create an active feeding area. Always add your water gradually in stages and keep mixing thoroughly throughout the process. Mistake number 12 is the other side of the coin, ground bait that's too dry. It's just as big a problem as overwetting. If the mix is bone dry, it simply won't hold its shape. When you cast out, the ball can literally explode in mid-air. If you're using a feeder, all your bait will spill out the moment it hits the surface or while it's still sinking. The result? You aren't creating a tight, concentrated baiting area. Instead, your feed gets swept away by the current and scattered over a wide radius. What happens next is that you'll pull in every small fish in the area, but you won't be able to pin them down in one spot. More importantly, you have zero chance of holding big fish on such a thin spread. Large fish don't want to hunt for tiny crumbs scattered across a massive area. They want a dinner plate of food, not just a few specks on a giant tablecloth. That's why getting the moisture balance right is vital. Your ground bait needs to be damp enough to reach the bottom intact, but active enough to start working once it's there. Mastering this takes practice, but it's one of the most important skills you can have in your locker. Mistake number 13 is a big one, especially if you're out on the bank in early spring or late autumn. It's the trap of using far too much flavoring in cold water. There's a common myth that the colder the water, the stronger the scent needs to be to wake up lethargic fish. But in reality, it's quite the opposite. In cold water, a fish's metabolism slows right down, making them sluggish and incredibly wary. While scents don't travel as quickly in the cold, they stay concentrated for much longer. An overpowering, punchy aroma can actually act as a chemical deterrent. It's unnatural and scares them off. Think about the smell of the woods after a spring rain. Those subtle, delicate scents. That's exactly what you should be aiming for with your ground bait. When the temperature drops, the less is more rule is spot on. Stick to very subtle, natural aromas, or skip the extra additives entirely and let the natural scent of the grains and ingredients do the work. Sometimes, the most effective ground bait in cold water is the one that's barely even noticeable to the human nose. Mistake 14 is all about the nutritional balance of your ground bait. Many budget mixes are packed with fast carbohydrates, things like breadcrumbs, bran, and crushed biscuits. These ingredients are brilliant for pulling fish in with their sweet scent and taste, and they definitely create a lot of activity in the swim, but there's a massive downside. They fill the fish up way too fast. Smaller fish gorge themselves on these high-calorie, low-value bits, and then move on. Meanwhile, the bigger fish, especially when they need protein for growth or to bulk up for winter, won't find anything substantial in a mix like that. If you want to hold specimen fish in your swim, your bait needs a solid protein hit. I'm talking about high-quality fish meal, krill meal, crushed pellets, or even milk powder. These ingredients don't just send out a strong attraction signal, they provide real nutritional value. Big fish recognize it as a proper food source and will stay on your spot for much longer. The bottom line is, stop thinking of your ground bait as a sugary dessert. Treat it like a proper, hearty meal. Mistake number 15 is all about your baiting strategy. Many anglers, particularly when feeder fishing, try to create a tiny, concentrated patch of bait by hitting the exact same spot, cast after cast. Now, if you're match fishing for small silvers, that's fine. Know when you're hunting for a trophy, this tactic can actually work against you. Imagine a big, wary bream moving into your swim. It comes across an unnaturally neat, tight mound of ground bait. To a cautious fish, that looks suspicious. In the wild, food doesn't usually sit in perfect little piles. A specimen fish will feel much more confident if the bait is spread over a small area, mimicking a natural feeding ground. So when you're initially baiting up, don't be afraid to spread your casts slightly. Instead of one tight spot, try to create a feeding carpet or a lane about 1 meter or 2 wide. This lets the fish approach from different angles without getting spooked, making them feed much more aggressively. As they move around your dinner table, the chances of them finding your hook bait go way up. Number 16 on the list, neglecting an inert or low nutrient base. Sometimes your main goal isn't to create a massive cloud of attraction. It's simply to get your larger offerings, like corn, peas, or pellets, straight to the bottom. This is especially important on fast-flowing rivers or in spots plagued by small nuisance fish. If you mix your heavy particles with a highly active ground bait, the current will wash away the attraction before the feeder even hits the deck, drawing in every small fish in the area. This is where a heavy, inert base becomes a game changer. The simplest and most effective option is using plain molehill, soil or clay. By mixing your particles with this ballast, you guarantee the bait reaches the bed intact. Soil doesn't have a strong scent and creates very little cloud, so it won't grab the attention of the small stuff. However, a larger fish, cruising by, will definitely spot that carpet of bait waiting on the bottom. It's a tactic for the patient angler, but there's no better way to weed out the small fry and focus on the quality fish. Mistake number 17 is the common misconception that your hook bait has to be an exact match for your loose feed. Now, there's some logic to this. Fish get used to a specific bait and start feeding with confidence, and often that works perfectly. But what happens when the fish are clearly in your swim and feeding hard, yet you aren't getting any bites? It likely means your hook bait is simply getting lost amongst hundreds of other identical offerings. In these situations, you actually want to do the opposite. Make your hook bait stand out from the crowd. Make it more visible and more attractive. You could try a bright, contrasting color, like a single red or white grain of corn over a bed of yellow. You could use a pop-up to lift your bait just off the bottom, or you could give it a boost by soaking it in a concentrated dip. Sometimes that one standout object is all it takes to trigger a bite. Mistake number 18 is ignoring the time factor, or quite simply, impatience. Specimen ground bait isn't a magic wand. It doesn't work instantly. You've laid out the perfect spread on the bottom, but what happens next? First, as always, the small silver fish arrive. They start darting around, picking at the crumbs. This commotion, in turn, draws in the slightly larger fish, like your average skimmers. It's only much later, maybe an hour or even 2, that a real trophy might move on to the spot. He'll hang back on the fringes for a long time, just watching the situation. If everything stays quiet and the bait doesn't look suspicious, he'll finally move in to feed. This is where many anglers go wrong. If they don't get a bite in the first half hour, they start tinkering, adding additives, changing the mix, or constantly recasting. All that fuss does is spook the cautious fish that was likely already sitting right there. You have to be prepared to wait. The best tactic is patience. Sit tight and let the bait do its job. Mistake number 19 is blindly copying match-style groundbait recipes. Many of us watch videos of fishing competitions or read articles by top match anglers and try to replicate their exact mixes. But we're forgetting one crucial thing. The goals of a match fisherman and a specimen hunter are worlds apart. A match angler's job is to catch as much weight as possible in a limited time. Every fish counts, whether it's a tiny bleak or a small roach. Because of this, their ground baits are designed to be incredibly active, fizzing, clouding the water, and packed with pungent aromas. They're built to pull in any fish in the area as quickly as possible and spark a feeding frenzy. Our goal, however, is that one big trophy fish. We don't want that frantic chaos. We need a calm, quiet swim and a heavy, nutritious feed that stays on the bottom. Using a high-attract match mix for trophy fishing isn't just ineffective, it's often counterproductive. It does the exact opposite of what we want, attracting all the small nuisance fish we're trying to avoid. By all means, learn from the pros, but always adapt their tactics to your own needs. Remember, trophy fishing isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And finally, mistake number 20, and it's the big one, being afraid to experiment. Look, there's no such thing as a magic bait recipe that works every single time, at every single venue. Every water is unique. On one lake, the carp might be all over strawberry, while on another they'll only touch garlic. One river's bream might want a dark ground bait, but on the next one over, they'll only settle for a light mix. Fish are fickle. Their tastes change with the seasons, the weather, and the natural food available. The biggest mistake you can make is finding one mix that works and then sticking to it for years without changing a thing. Fishing is a constant game of trial and error. Don't be afraid to shake things up. Add a weird spice, change the color, or try a different texture. Really look at your results. What worked today? What was the secret last week? Keep a logbook and jot down your observations. The anglers who consistently land the big ones are those who never stop learning and aren't afraid to break the mold. At the end of the day, the best ground bait isn't something you buy off a shelf. It's the one you've perfected yourself through trial and error for your specific neck of the woods. So, what does this all mean? All that time spent splashing out on expensive additives and high-performance ingredients, could we actually have been scaring off that dream catch ourselves? Exactly. As it turns out, the secret to landing a trophy fish isn't about creating massive clouds of attraction or using overpowering scents. When it comes to the big ones, more, louder, and sweeter isn't the answer. It's about being smarter, more subtle, and more tactical. To wrap things up, if you want your ground bait to be a magnet for the big ones, rather than just attracting small fry, focus on larger particles. Stick to subtle, natural aromas, aim for an inert mix that stays pinned to the bottom, match your colors to the lakebed, and above all, stay patient. Your goal is to lay out a rich, safe, and nutritious feast that only the biggest, wisest fish in the water will truly appreciate. Thanks for watching right to the end. If you've picked up a tip or two today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our future fishing secrets. Now, I've got a question for you. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made with your bait? Or perhaps you've got a secret ingredient of your own for targeting specimens. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories and get a proper discussion going.